Angela, are you going to switch for me? Okay, thank you. We are here to talk about cute speech, and we are giving a great deal of information in a short time, so bear with us. And I'm going to try to give you time to read the slides before we talk about them. Sometimes we'll have that time, sometimes we just move on. So the reason we are here is that the National Center for Hearing Assessment and Management, which is a multidisciplinary center in Utah State University, and their main goal is to provide, to ensure that all infants and toddlers who with hearing loss are identified as early as possible, and their families are provided with opportunities for interventions, as well as information for education and communication choices in a timely manner. And NSHAM did a study in 2018 where they found that cute speech use is on the rise across the country. However, one of their results is that, and it says in chart 4 here, the second bullet, is that the family report on the quality of information provided about communication choices upon diagnosis was very poor for cute speech. It was the lowest, it was really rated as the lowest, meaning that parents and professionals are not getting enough information to learn about cute speech to recognize it as a communication choice for their families and in the school system. Next. So about cute speech, Dr. Oren Cornett is the one who designed cute speech system. He was an engineer, a physicist, a mathematician, and happened to, in the early 60s, to work at Gallaudet University as the vice president of long-range planning. At that time, and even today, the average deaf adult has a fourth grade reading level. Around fourth grade reading level is when we switch from learning to read to reading to learn. And Dr. Cornett was trying to solve that problem. So this is a quote from what he was trying to do, meaning that as hearing parents of deaf children, and our language is English or whatever other language, a spoken language, he wanted to find a way to accurately convey that language through vision in real time meaning as we are speaking naturally. We call it like discourse, natural discourse. Next. So cute speech is a visual communication system that allows access to the phonemes of a spoken language. And we will talk about phoneme in a few slides down. As a communication mode, cute speech is recognized under the American Disabilities Act, as well as Individual with Disabilities Education Act, and also in the VDOE guidelines for working with deaf children in Virginia public schools. So cute speech, as Dr. Cornett designed it, has 3 components. He has 8 hand shapes that represent the consonant phonemes of English. And we're talking here about cute American English. So 8 hand shapes represent the consonant phonemes, or most people refer to them as sounds of the language. And then 4 locations around the face that represent the vowel phonemes. So hand shapes and location, along with the natural mouth movements, provide a cue. So English is a consonant vowel language, and many spoken languages are consonant vowel languages. So the word cat has a consonant, vowel, and a consonant. And in cueing, the consonant when it's followed by a vowel, goes to the placement of that vowel. So to cue the word cat will be cat, cat. The word kitty has 2 syllables and it's kitty, kitty. The phonemes or sounds that look similar on the mouth are cued with different hand shapes. For example, if I say the m, b, p, they all look the same on the mouth. So if I say 3 words with no voice, can you tell what I'm saying? So I said mat, pat, bat. They all look the same on the mouth with no voice. So a deaf person cannot really lip read because they all look the same. However, with cueing, it will be mat, bat, pat. You can see the difference in the consonants there. Phonemes also that look different on the mouth will share the same hand shapes. And phonemes that look same on the mouth will share different hand shapes. So I'm gonna say a few words that have the same consonants, but the nucleus, which is the vowel, is different. So I can say bean, bone, ben, ban, bun. All the vowels are different and they make the words different. Thank you. So the cues along with the mouth shape has to be synchronized to allow better speech reading, access to speech reading. And this is a cute speech chart. You can see the 8 hand shapes and the groups of phonemes under each hand shape. The same thing with the vowel placements, and each vowel placement has 2 or 3 vowels to go along with it. So cueing is based on pronunciation or sound, not on spelling. So deaf cuers learn to do spelling just like hearing kids do in school. So if you look at the first set of examples, we have the words to, grew, through, mo, and glue. These are spelled differently, but they are cued the same because they have the same vowel sound. They're cued partially the same. The ending of it is, so to, grew, through, mo, glue. You can see that they all end in the same placement, which is the vowel sound, because they all share that same vowel. However, the words next, cough, bow, through, and rough, and though, they all end up the same, they're spelled the same way at the end, but they are all pronounced differently. So they are cued also differently. So cough, bow, through, rough, and though. And deaf kids who are cuers have access to the same information as a hearing kid would have. Language acquisition and development. This happens when everyday experiences, natural family interaction, and clear, consistent exposure to cueing. This doesn't happen. Family interaction happens consistently. It has to be done with parents have to be involved. Parent involvement is vital for the transparency of language use. Children acquire language when they see and hear the language that is layered with activity, meaning playing games, showing things, talking about it. And that's when meaning becomes transparent. So cueing can provide access to the spoken language by conveying all the necessary building blocks of language. And this is a little bit of kind of linguistically, and we're going to be covering very, very surface explanation about what these are. So cueing, we talked about phonemes. Cueing provides access to the phonemic information of language. Phonemes are the smallest units of language that have no meaning. So m, s, k are phonemes. They don't mean anything on their own. Meaning starts to happen at the morpheme level. Morphemes are the smallest meaningful unit of language. For example, the word cat is a word, it's a morpheme, it has meaning. And then when I say cats, I added another morpheme. The suffix s is added at the end, and that changes the meaning from a singular cat to plural. And deaf children often drop this S sound at the end of word endings. And however, cueing is a good visual that keeps that S at the final S intact. And then we can look at the morphemes again in the past tense morphemes, the words with ED endings. ED endings, verbs, all of verbs end with ED. And that's the convention of writing that morpheme. However, verbs can be pronounced differently, even though they're written at the end the same way. For example, the verb moved, fated, and laughed are pronounced differently. So they would be cued differently. Moved, faded, laughed. So deaf kids, again, have access with cueing to the morphemic level of language. Then syntax. Syntax is how phrases and sentences are structured, and every language has its own grammatical rules. I'm going to the store. The order of the words in the sentence make it a correctly grammatical according to English rules. Stormy go doesn't. Then semantics relates to meaning in human language. And the semantics is where the richness of vocabulary also happens. So we can say glow, shine, glisten, sparkle. There are nuances, same meaning, but there are different nuances for these words, and they enrich the vocabulary and the language of the speaker. And deaf kids have access to that language as well. And then we have semantics. Semantics relates to meaning in human language. That's what we talked about, actually. Then we have pragmatics. Pragmatics is the social language. It's language used for different audiences, different situations, what we say, how we say it, and to whom we say it. It's all culturally bound. And cueing helps develop that pragmatic language, use of language. We can say, oh, he's such a ham. Okay, you can say that in, to somebody who speaks French and they may not understand what you mean. But in our culture, we would know that that's somebody who's being silly or funny or that sort of thing. And then we can say, how are you? Or, hey, what's up? So it depends on the environment you're in, whether it's informal, we need to speak informal with our closest friends, or being formal with people that we're presenting with or working with. So again, that's part of the pragmatics. Can you open the door? Can you open the door? Am I asking because it's physically hard to open the door is heavy to swing open, or would you please open the door? So again, nuances of language are also provided through cueing. Reading and literacy. So we always hear in research and studies about how deaf children can learn language, reading and writing, and how they can do that is to have phonemic awareness. So phonemic awareness is a prerequisite for reading. It does not matter whether they have access to it, whether through visual access or they can hear it, as long as it's transparent and it's complete access. So phonemic awareness, what that means is the ability to identify the phonemes in segments of words. For example, the word cat, for a kid to know that cat has ka, a, and t in it, that is phonemic awareness. and then the ability to understand that the words can be represented in print. And language is in the mind. So when I know cat is my pet or my neighbor's pet, I see it on TV. And then when it's coming time to read and I look at the word ka, ta, and I start to sound it out, it's like, oh, that is cat. This is the cat that's that image in my head, or that my pet. So you start connecting what you know in your mind to the print. And then the ability to manipulate the phoneme segments, meaning that if you change the order of the phonemes, like the word pat, if you swap the T and P positions, it becomes tap. So you can play with those phonemes and change meanings. And then they can rhyme. Cat, pat, sat, they rhyme. And cueing shows rhyming, and rhyming is a huge part of reading development and reading acquisition. Okay. So this one is talking about that reading and literacy requires that phonemic and phonologic code to be internalized. So the fact that we are cueing everything we say, and we are providing the cueing at the phonemic, morphemic, syntactic, and semantic level, pragmatic level, the deaf kids are able to internalize the phonologic and phonemic code of American English. And that allows them to become, prepare them for reading, because reading is a decoding task. And the reading development will happen naturally, as would happen with a hearing child. Reading is not a natural human process. It has to be taught and learned. And meaning doesn't come just from reading text. Meaning is in the mind of the reader, like we talked about cat, and you have that experience in your mind, and then you find the word for it in the text. Books have a code, and the reader must be able to decode, question, imagine, and that's when comprehension happens. Comprehension is key. If you didn't understand it, then you didn't really read it. So cueing, deaf children learn language before they learn to read, just like hearing kids do. Okay. We often are asked, what is cued language, and what's different between cued language and cued speech? And we will talk about that in this slide and the next slide. However, a cued speech system is applied to a language that's traditionally spoken. It becomes a modality of that cued language. In the United States and in Virginia schools, we use cued American English. English is a language, and the modalities for that language include spoken, written, and cued. A cued speech system has been adapted to close to 70 languages and dialects. There is a cued Arabic, cued French, cued Farsi, cued Spanish, cued German, and so many more. Cued speech itself is a mode of communication, such as, as is speaking and signing. Signing is a mode of communication, speaking is a mode of communication, writing is a mode of communication. English, Arabic, ASL, BSL, which is British Sign Language, are languages. Cued speech refers to the specific system that Dr. Cornett created. Cued language is a descriptive term for what we are doing. Cued American English is a specific language that's being cued. It's a non-traditional way of conveying that language. The same as tactile ASL. It is a non-conventional or traditional way of conveying ASL through touch. And this chart kind of basically the same things I just said. How long does it take to learn cued speech? We typically say 15 to 20 hours of, you can learn the acute speech system that's on the chart. It can be taught either usually with when we had the Q camps, it could be learned in a weekend, 2 days, 2 days and a half. It could be learned in a classroom setting, like Maureen is doing now through NVCSA. I teach it at Nova. It's usually 12 to 14 classroom sessions. And fluency comes with practice. Cueing, the cool thing about cueing is that for hearing parents who speak English in this country, you're not learning a new language. You are learning a finite system that helps you make that language visual for your deaf child. So it is just fluency comes with practice, and we kind of compare it to learning how to type. You have to put your fingers on the appropriate letters, and you have to be able to connect to make a word. Same thing with cueing. You have to remember what the phonemes are in each hand shape, what the placements are, what for each vowel for each hand placement, and putting them together. And it does take time, and it does practice to become fluent. Benefits of cued speech, we talked about phonemic awareness. It provides access to the most basic building blocks of language. It provides access to the language of the home, whether you are a native English speaker or a Spanish speaker, you can use that native language cueing system in your home. Again, we talked about how it supports decoding skills and allows you to be able to read, getting complete language acquisition. Deaf kids can have the same literacy levels as hearing peers. Research has shown that they can be very comparable. And cueing allows kids to achieve their up to their potential in school and in education and at the workplace. These are a couple of research studies that were done that talked about spelling and rhyming tasks. Deaf cuers were able to make the same mistakes as hearing kids, and different way of making mistakes than those who are non-cuers. And then the rhyming as well is the kids were able to produce rhymes and no rhymes, even like you look at the example here, it says blue and few, even though they're spelled differently, they can tell that these words rhyme. And deaf cuers were able to do that as well as hearing kids. Capabilities of cued speech. So cued speech, we are able to provide accents and dialects. I can cue hawk the car, just like they talk in Boston. Jeet, and that is one way. A friend of mine from Pittsburgh, they say, did you eat? And they say, jeet. So we are able to cue accents as dialects. Rhymes, we talked about how important rhyming is for development of reading. And you saw a lot of the rhyming things that we have done. Environmental sounds are really important. And as cued language transliterators, we provide access to the environmental sounds in the classroom or around the classroom, around the school, outside or inside. We are able to cue sneezes because sneezes provide that cultural, social interaction, how hearing people act and react based on the sounds in the environment. When somebody sneezes and I cue a chew, somebody might respond to say, God bless you, Gesundheit, or do you have a cold? Do you need a tissue? So deaf kids get to see how the hearing people are interacting based on the sounds in the environment. And then nonsense words like in Dr. Seuss books, they are filled with rhymes and nonsense words. And my son, when he was little and before we discovered cued speech, I could not read Dr. Seuss books to him. But once we started learning to cue, we went back and caught up on everything that we missed. And somebody put supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, so I'm gonna say it. supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. So you can cue nonsense words. There are a string of phonemes, and we have access to these phonemes, so we can do that. Foreign languages, I said there are multiple foreign languages that are adapted, cue speech has been adapted to. And also in the classroom, foreign language learning is attainable because we are able as cued language transliterators to cue in a Spanish class or a French class or a Latin class. And I think I will turn it now to Angela. Thank you, Angela.
All right, just switching from one laptop to another. Okay. All right, so I think Sahad covered a lot of the stuff that's in my section, so I will try to go through it as quickly as possible. So the primary advantage of cued speech is that it allows early access to the language of the home for those who spoken language is the primary language of the home, which is a large majority of deaf children. Whether that typically, when we're talking about it, it's cued American English in this country, but it could also be cued Spanish, and then they get access to cued English at school. And as Sahad mentioned, it can be taught fairly quickly. You may be it's a finite system as opposed to American Sign Language or any foreign language. Those take time to develop fluency, and if learned later in life, will never be a native language. Whereas cued languages can be mapped onto the language that you already know. And you may be slow after your first intro class, but you can cue absolutely anything in the language that you want, grammatically correct, just maybe a little slowly. And so that enables parents to begin modeling their own native language right away within the first few months, which is a crucial language window for their child. They can model copy the babbling sounds, or point out body parts, and then as they get faster, the child will be picking it up more, but they'll be using the language that they are comfortable with right from the beginning. And by having the child having that access to the language of the home, not only do they have the natural family interaction, which is how children learn language. It needs to be natural interaction from fluent users, and cued language allows that possibility. And they also are able to be a part of the culture of the home. Families have their own culture, whether that's a particular prayer that is said in a foreign language, whether that is a specific word for a food dish that a family member made, some sort of ethnic food that has a specific name, a pet name for the family. All of that is part of the culture of the family, and the deaf child can be a part of that. So just a few, traditionally, cued speech was, everything was, you had to have a choice. You could choose the oral or LSL path, you could choose the cued speech path, you could choose the signing path, and you had to pick one. And it doesn't necessarily have to be that strict and that simple. There's lots of different options. And so I just want to talk about some of the benefits of cued speech with various options. And so the first one here is cochlear implants. Cued speech can support cochlear implant use, contrary to some popular thought. Cochlear implants are not always enough. I know the technology is getting so much better, and I've certainly seen people being very successful with them, but there are still gaps occasionally. They malfunction. What do you do if you have to wait a few weeks to send away for a new processor? At the end of the night, kid wants to take it off to go to bed. Child's in the bath, you're giving them a bath at night. That's a great time to give that language, naming the body parts, being silly, just having a conversation, your child's probably not wearing a cochlear implant in the bathtub. And batteries die, it happens. Cued speech can give a phonological foundation before implementation. Parent can learn to cue right from the get-go, and it takes a little while to go through the process to get the CI implanted, go back, turn it on, have the mapping, then the child learns to use it. If they have seen the cueing and they are starting and they're aware of those phonemes, they have some of that foundation of the English language, then they can realize what they're hearing, what they're seeing, and they can map those together and validate what they're hearing. And it can be used during AV therapy. There was a time when many audiologists, speech therapists were saying you couldn't. They are more and more, they're realizing it does work, just to give that validation and feedback. And so similarly, it can support LSL outcomes because mostly they are the same language, same target language. You can cue and speak at the same time without ruining, degrading the quality of the language. It is still English. And again, you can give that phonological foundation. You can clarify specific vocabulary or names. There have been many times I've had someone introduce themselves with a name that was less than common, and I really wish that person could cue so I could get that feedback of, was it or because sometimes they just sound the same. And I've had students in biology class who grew up cueing, and as they got older, had a better foundation in biology class. The teacher's wearing an FM, everyone's quiet, they're up in the front, everything's on the board. But then when the teacher says the scientific name for this is, they looked right at me because they wanted to see how that was cued, how that was pronounced, knowing that it was going to be a strange word. Oops, why is it not doing? There you go. Can help fill in sounds in noisy environments, out at a restaurant, at a party, a classroom. I said that one biology high school class was a little quiet, but that is not usually the case, especially in an elementary school. And these aren't the primary goals cued speech was invented, but it certainly can help with speech production. I've seen speech pathologists use it, again, to give that feedback. And cued speech users do tend to be better speech readers. And then with ASL, again, for many years, people thought these two were completely opposite, and actually they pair really well together to be bilingual. They are both completely visual, 100% visual languages, and they are two distinct languages. So cued American English, ASL, you're not trying to adapt signs to use with English. You're not changing the syntax of the English language. You're not changing the signs. You're leaving the two languages completely intact. And SimCom, it doesn't always work. It leaves out many of the grammatical features of both languages. Now, for someone who has the foundation of English and ASL, and they see someone SimComming, they can figure out the meaning of that, but it is not an ideal way to learn the language when they don't have that foundation yet. And just there are many ways, many different ways to do this, whether ASL is the language of the home and access to English through cued American English at school, whether cued Spanish is the language of the home and they're getting cued English and ASL at school. There's so many different ways of combining the two. There isn't just one way. And I'm going to go through these probably fairly quickly. I think we've covered most of these, but voice is not required for cued speech. You do not need to have any hearing at all. My sister is profoundly deaf. She took AP English in high school. She has better English skills than I do. I ask her for help when I'm writing something. Um, it is 100% visually accessible. Sahad talked a little bit about this. Cued speech, the system, is not a language, but cued American English is. Cued speech conveys complete language. And that, and I think Sahad covered most of this. Auditory training and listening spoken language, we talked about that. And just because, again, I talked about the student who in biology was not using cued speech as much later in life, but had that foundation. Parents cued at home from a young age, went to a cueing preschool, had CLTs all through school, which they used absolutely. Sorry, the question, SIMCOM, simultaneous communication, so signing and talking at the same time, which is still very common in many programs that use signing. Total communication is often becomes SIMCOMing, signing and talking at the same time. And you cannot do accurate, grammatically correct ASL while doing in English word order. So many deaf adults do not necessarily use a transliterator on the job. After college, they may find they don't need it every day, but maybe once or twice a year when they have a big conference or a big training where they're learning new information, they may request the transliterator for those few days. And then when they go back to their office and their normal work, they can communicate with their boss in the small environment of coworkers at the without the CLT. So everyone varies in their use of it, and not at all intended to replace ASL. As I said, they both can absolutely be used at the same time for bilingual access. And cued speech is on the rise. I'll show a chart in a moment here, but it is definitely growing and continues even since 2018. I feel like these numbers have already gone up. It isn't quite everywhere yet. Certainly it is much more popular in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area than some other pockets, particularly further out west. But it is being actively used in many other countries as well. And this is the chart that it has gone up from 3% up to 12% now, mostly cued speech. But if you include LSL or sign language and cued speech, close to a quarter of people in this reported that they are using cued speech to some degree. Even though, as Sahad mentioned at the very beginning, they're not necessarily getting this information. As you can see, cued speech had the largest percentage of poor information and the lowest percentage of excellent. So there's a couple of cuers there. And so with that, I will turn it over to Maureen to talk a little bit more about NVCSA and some resources.
Okay, it says that screen sharing is disabled.
This is Terry. Hold on one second. I've made everyone co-host and we have too many and it's not allowing me to.
I think Angela has to leave, so maybe I could have hers.
Yeah, that would work. This is Terry. That would work.
Well, with that, I am going to leave. Thank you so much for having us. And I know Maureen will wrap us up with answering any questions. So thank you.
Angela, this is Terry. Thank you so much. Have a good night. All right. Maureen, this is Terry, and for some reason, I am not able to make you
Um,
host. Oh, Sahad, can you do it? That's right, because you are the,
is the
yeah.
host.
Sahad, could you go in under Maureen's name under the participant list? And click on more.
There we go. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks everyone for your patience.
I know how that happened. All right, well, thank you. And I'm just going to move right in. I know we're getting a little bit short on time here. So Sahad and Angela both talked a little bit about the results of the NSHAM study. And the Cued Speech community, which includes the National Cued Speech Association, as well as our local chapter, the Northern Virginia Cued Speech Association, we are working hard to steadily improve those statistics, particularly the one about providing information to parents about cued speech. So as many of you know, the Early Hearing Detection and Intervention, or EDI, Act funds early detection, intervention, and family engagement. And so the EDI requires that new families receive accurate and adequate information about all the modes of communication. And cued speech is a mode of communication recognized under ADA, IDA, and the Virginia guidelines for teachers of students who are deaf and hard of hearing. So again, we thank Terry and the Virginia Hands and Voices for giving us this opportunity to share some accurate information with you all tonight. The mission of the Northern Virginia Cued Speech Association is to provide education, advocacy, and support for families, professionals, and deaf adults who choose cued speech. And under the mission of education, we've been offering free or very low cost cued speech classes for many years. And currently we're offering 3 levels of cued speech classes online via Zoom. We conduct informational presentations such as this one for organizations, schools, professional groups, or people who request them. We also provide info sheets and rack cards that are produced by the National Cued Speech Association for distribution to families and professionals such as doctors' offices and school IEP teams. For advocacy, we exhibit at conferences such as the Virginia State Conference for Teachers of the Deaf, the Opening Doors Unlocking Potential Conference, and also when national organizations hold conferences in our area, we try to exhibit there as well. And we have displays at events where there will be attendees who are parents, educators, and other professionals, and such as the NVRC, Celebrate Communication Information Fair, and the Hearing Loss Association of America Walk for Hearing. We also help students and families advocate to get cued speech on their individualized IEP plan if they happen to be in a location that doesn't already offer it. Under support, we host a variety of informational and social events for our families, most of which are family friendly and include childcare and children's activities. You can see a few of them listed here, though obviously some of the in-person events other than the golf have had to be changed to virtual formats. The last event, Q Camp Virginia, actually falls under all 3 categories of our mission. Here's a picture of our camp in 2019. The Q Camp Virginia is a workshop for families and professionals that's held every year over the Columbus Day long weekend at the Jamestown 4-H Educational Center in Williamsburg. This picture is an adult class taking place on a porch overlooking the James River. And here's another one with 4-H leaders working with one of our children's groups. Some of the things offered at camp include classes for adults and children, presentations, workshops, exciting activities for the kids and families, and a whole lot of fun. We weren't able to hold the camp this year, but we really hope that we'll be able to be back in 2021. In the interim, we've been busy on Zoom with classes and social events. We have 2 classes starting in January, beginning cued speech, and then the follow-on level beyond the basics. And you can learn more and register on our website at nvcsa.org. And again, the classes are either free or very low cost. The Northern Virginia, DC, Maryland area is the largest cueing community in the country, and cued speech is now used in all the major public school systems in Northern Virginia. But for those of you who may be outside that area or even outside Virginia, the National Cued Speech Association has regional representatives throughout the country who can provide information and put you in touch with cueing resources. We are part of the Capital Region, which also includes DC, Maryland, West Virginia, and Delaware, and our regional representatives are listed here. The National Cued Speech Association can be found online at cuedspeech.org and offers information about cued speech, about upcoming classes, workshops, and events and camps around the country. We have a newsletter, research, advocacy, and also board member contact information and regional rep identification as well. Here are some resources for learning cued speech, improving fluency, becoming part of the cueing community, or becoming a cued language transliterator, which is the cued speech equivalent of the sign language interpreter. Now, all of these resources and links that we've showed and email addresses are going to be available to you on a handout that Terry has that she can send out with our contact information and links. We also included some fun links here that show cued speech in use in various applications, including a child reading, music, and family life. And that concludes our presentation. Terry, I don't know if we have time for questions, but if we do, maybe Sahad can come back and we can answer quickly if we have anything that we want to share.
Sure. Hi, this is Terry. Thank you. Thank you so much. Does anyone, we've been monitoring the chat box. I don't see anything. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, please feel free to go ahead and put them in the chat box. We thank everyone for sticking around. We know it's a little bit after 8 o'clock, but we had some technical difficulties in the beginning there. I do have a question while we're waiting to see if anybody does have anything to enter in the chat. Are there classes available for people to become a CLT if they're interested? I know that you had said there's classes for people who want to learn to cue, but what about someone who does want to be a CLT? I think we have a fair amount of professionals joining us tonight.
Can you unmute?
To become a transliterator, there is the courses provided by Language Matters. If you are working in Virginia and you are wanting to be a CLT, like you are already working in a school and you're on their way to be a CLT, you can also contact me I provide training because we get funding from the state of Virginia for all educational interpreters, and cued language translators will fall under that. So I do provide training, and usually people attend it, and it's paid for. Most of the courses are provided through Language Matters because they have a whole series of prerequisites courses that people have to take to become qualified CLTs.
Thanks. And this is Terry. We have a question. Do teachers in public schools learn this?
Yes, they do. Actually, in the class that I taught in August, right before school started, we had a number of school professionals from our local school system. We had a new assistant principal. We had a reading teacher, a classroom teacher, an art teacher, and a music teacher. So a number of well, obviously the teachers of the deaf and hard of hearing learn it, but we have a number of mainstream teachers as well who want to be able to communicate with the kids in the school or the kids in their classes.
And this is Terry. You said, I know more, and you had sent me that contact information sheet, and I will go ahead and send that out to everybody. Would that be the best resource? I'm sure there's some parents and professionals joining us tonight who maybe live in areas that don't have access to supports like this, whether they want it for their child or perhaps the school system wants it, but they just don't have it. Does that contact sheet have information of where people can go?
It does. They can definitely contact any of the three of us. I am the regional representative for the Capital Region. And if you're outside that region, you can go to the National Acute Speech Association website and find your rep, or you can reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with the right person. And now with the classes being virtual, we can provide classes to people anywhere. To be able to learn for the families and the school professionals.
Great. We have another question. I don't know if you see it pop up. Is the CLT certification the course that you spoke about? That would be 20 hours. This is all very new to me, which is so exciting because that's why we wanted to do this, to give this opportunity for people to learn.
Yeah, the 20 hours, really the 20 hours was learning the acute speech system. As in the chart, but to become acute language translators, there are multiple. Typically, it's usually before COVID, it used to be like a weekend, a Saturday, all day Saturday, and we provided training like 6 months in the school year on Saturdays. With COVID, we are trying to be more creative and trying to provide some trainings on Zoom as well. But it is not just 20 hours, it's multiple trainings that you will have to take to become, there is the state qualified. Virginia has a state qualification. It's called the Virginia Quality Assurance Screening. There's one for sign language interpreters, there's one for acute language translators. You have to pass the written test and you have to pass the performance test to become state qualified. And there are levels of qualifications. And then there's the national certification with a whole different ball game as well, which requires a lot of training as well.
Yeah, we did have a little bit of a discrepancy there on the slides. We had one slide that said 12 hours and one slide that said 16 to 20 hours. And you'll see in many places, maybe the Acute Speech website, that it does take about 12 classroom hours to go through the entire system, but we added a little bit of padding in there later on because you really do need some practice and implementation in order to be able to use the system independently. But I also wanted to point out that Sahad is teaching a class, several classes at NOVA that are electives as part of the interpreting program, and in those classes, she goes over a lot of the skills that would lead to transliterator certification.
And then this is Terry, another question, which is a free training that is offered through the school system?
You have to be an educational interpreter to qualify for the free trainings.
This is Terry. I think it's always surprising. It's hard to learn anything that's new, especially if it's a new language. And I think people are always very surprised when they hear that people can learn how to cue in a weekend. I was really shocked when you told me that. And, you know, I think that that's great. Do you want to, before we wrap up, Q Camp is, I've never had the opportunity to attend. I've always wanted to. It's always conflicted, but I know that there are discounts for people that do attend. Do you want to just touch on that? Because I know parents may be kind of put off by the cost of what a camp can be.
Well, yes, actually, we do fundraising throughout the year so that we can offer families with children who have not yet reached school age. In other words, kindergarten and below. They can come to camp, a family of up to 8 family members, for $75, which is the registration fee, and that includes 3 to 4 nights of lodging and about 7 meals. So it's plus all the instruction and all the children's activities and all the evening entertainment, and for families who, or any family, not just those families, but families who can't afford that, we also offer financial assistance. We try really hard to make Q Camp accessible for everybody who wants or needs to attend. That's
great. We have 2 more questions. If Derek asks, if I get the cueing certification, will I be able to teach cue anywhere?
Yes, to get the cueing certification, first you have to learn to cue, and then you have to go through a course for instructors. It's a 2-day course, and then you have to take the certification exam, which consists of learning, finding errors. So when you're teaching, you're able to tell when people are making errors, you can correct them. And then a written exam, which is 150 questions, general knowledge about cueing, about speech, about audiology, about history of deafness, that sort of thing. So it's 150 questions that you would have to pass as well.
And this is Terry, is that a national certification or is it?
Yes. Yes.
National. Okay. Last question. Carla says, I am a Spanish language interpreter. Would this qualify? And I assume she's referring back to the free training offered through the school system, because you said that someone has to be an educational interpreter.
Right. Spanish language interpreter, but you need to know how to cue. So you need to learn how to cue first before you, and the funding, Virginia Department of Education doesn't allow me to provide funding for learning how to cue. So you have to already know how to cue before you start the training to be a transliterator.
I see.
Although I would point out that the classes that NVCSA teaches online are, the beginning classes are free of charge for people who are aspiring transliterators. So.
Great. Well, thank you again. This is Terry. I know we're way past 8 o'clock. Thank you so much for all of you who have stayed on. You know, I think there's pros and cons to living in a virtual world. The con is we were delayed a little bit because of technical difficulties, but the pro is that we've all been able to gather here. And I can tell by some of the names that we represent a few different regions in Virginia. And I believe there's even a few folks who don't live in Virginia. So it's been a great tool for us to be able to get this information out to everybody across the state. So I want to thank you again, Sahad and Maureen and Angela, for presenting. We're so happy that we were finally able to pull this together. I want to apologize again to Derek for not having an ASL interpreter. We generally do need 24 to 48 hours notice for interpreter requests, but thank you, Kristen, for stepping in and offering to interpret. I do have your contact information, and we would, Derek is saying thank you. Yeah. Kristen, we would like to pay you back for your time. We know that you were going to just be a guest tonight and you want to watch the recorded presentation afterwards. So thank you so much. We'll be getting a hold of you. And then of course, we want to thank the Virginia Department for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. through their contract with Virginia Relay and providing the remote conference captioning. I believe that's it. You can find all of our information on our website and on our Facebook page. We have started our open enrollment for 2021. We welcome parents, professionals, deaf and hard of hearing adults, students, grandparents, anyone to be a member of our chapter. You will receive a national quarterly newspaper as part of your commitment to our chapter. And I believe that's it. I think I covered everything. This is our last event for the year. We hope everyone has a very safe and joyous holiday season, however that may look. And we definitely have some things planned for 2021. And so we look forward to seeing everyone soon, regardless if that may be in person or virtual. So thank you again. This concludes our presentation. Again, Maureen and Sahad, thank you so much. And have
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. Good night.
Good night.